Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to a new week, another week at home. We are still looking at what role do treaties play in global politics today. Um, Last lesson, as you know, on Friday, we did the lecture notes on what treaties are. So you should have some good notes there. And you did a group work activity analysing different treaties. And I can see from the Google post that you've mostly all done that quite well, actually. You've all looked at different treaties and have got details of different treaties there. What I'd recommend you all do now is to save a copy, make a copy of that document and add it to your folder for this unit, just so it's in your notes for revision at some point. Okay, so well done on those notes there. I just want to explain today's lesson. You're going to be working on this today and this week. If I, it's a bit of lag this morning. If we go to the website, we are all going to be working on this case study activity. It comes after activity 2. And so for this unit, just like in the last lesson when we looked at Paris Climate Conference as a case study of global governance, we're now looking at the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea as a case study of a treaty. Now, I've chosen this as a case study because obviously we are pretty much in China. This is a case study really close to us that really links Hong Kong, China into wider global politics. So the first thing I want you to do today is individually to watch this video here on the South China Sea dispute. There are loads of videos on YouTube about this if you just type in South China Sea dispute. Um, and once you've watched that, you should be able to answer this question in your head at least. What is the disagreement about? It's up to you if you want to make a brief timeline or detailed notes on that disagreement. It's a good case study to return to because it isn't just a case study for treaties. The South China Sea is a case study for the whole of Unit 1, and you can really link in some good examples. But once you've looked at the South China Sea dispute, we're going to look at that in a bit more detail. Essentially, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea was a treaty signed in the 1980s. It was negotiated since 1973, and it was one of the first treaties that China, as a new member state of the UN from 1972, it was one of the first international treaties that they were able to negotiate. So they were very keen to show the world that they could be a multilateral player, that they could contribute to global governance in a positive way. The convention is a really super detailed treaty. Essentially, most laws in the world to do with trade and conflict and development were all to do with the territory of sovereign states on the land. And the sea was often missed out in many international law treaties in terms of who controls the seas, especially the resources around the coasts of nations. And so the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea set up lots of rules to do with how states should act and who has sovereignty at sea. And one of the main articles of the treaty was this idea of exclusive economic zones, that every nation could control the seabed up to 200 nautical miles from its coastline. That's great, but this all changed about 10 years ago. I think it was 2009. China released a map of the South China Sea with this 9 dashed line included. It was originally 11. And then basically China has claimed the majority of the South China Sea, including lots of island groups like the Spratly Islands and offshore shoals, because they believe there was oil and gas reserves there. And it's a major dispute because other nations around the South China Sea, like the Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei, they all claim the same area. And so China has threatened to withdraw from this treaty. In 2013, the Philippine government took China to court, using the provisions of this treaty, the conflict resolution provisions in its appendix. they took China to court. They set up an international court at the uh, International Court of Arbitration in the Netherlands, and they basically said China is in breach of the treaty because of its 9-dash line. China is a member of the treaty, so is regulated by its rules. And the court actually ruled in favor of the Philippines and said, yes, China's 9-dash line has no historic or legal grounds in international law, and it can't just claim all this sea. China threatened to withdraw from the treaty. Which threatened compliance. And it's a really good case study because it shows how nation states sometimes sign treaties to get what they want, but sometimes go back on them when they realize actually it's not in our national interest. Interestingly, although China threatened to leave this treaty, it is still within the treaty. It hasn't done anything, but it has tried to sidestep the treaty by essentially bribing the Filipino government, threatening war, and basically redrawing the map by creating its own islands using artificial dredging, creating its own islands in order to claim that there is land suitable for human habitation and that land is China's. So I'm going to stop there. Really interesting case study. There are 7 sources on the classroom. I've said which sources I want you all to look at. And for what I want you to do is, for task 3, I have created a Padlet. I want you all to work on the same document. There's a link to the Padlet there. And on this Padlet, just like with the other case study, I want you to look through your source, take out information, and you're trying to answer these 7 questions essentially. But for the Padlet, it can just be an information dump on the treaty. I want you all to find out, why has China complied or not complied with the treaty? What is this conflict about in the South China Sea? And the sources should all help you. So any information you think is pertinent to this question, just dump it, create a new post on Padlet, just like last time. And hopefully, once that's done, you should have a Padlet full of answers in order to kind of answer these 7 questions. You're going to be working on that today and in your single period lessons this week. It's week 1, so we've got this Wednesday and Thursday period, which I want you to work on this case study. The following Monday, we'll move on to a new lesson. Okay, that's it today. Please submit all that on the Google Classroom once you're done. And that's it.